Why Japan's money experiment failed. Japan's economy has long been a subject of global fascination and scrutiny. Once a powerhouse that led the world in technological innovation and manufacturing, Japan faced a prolonged period of economic stagnation in the 1990s, often referred to as the lost decade. In response, the Japanese government and the Bank of Japan embarked on an ambitious monetary policy experiment to revive the economy. However, despite their best efforts, this experiment has largely been deemed a failure. Understanding why Japan's money experiment failed involves examining the policies implemented, the challenges faced, and the broader economic context. The economic context and policies. In the late 1980s, Japan experienced a massive economic bubble driven by speculative investments in real estate and stock markets. When the bubble burst in the early 1990s, the economy entered a period of deflation and stagnation. To combat this, the Bank of Japan implemented a series of unconventional monetary policies, including near-zero interest rates and quantitative easing, a process where the central bank purchases financial assets to inject money directly into the economy. The idea behind these policies was to stimulate economic activity by making borrowing cheaper and increasing the money supply, encouraging businesses to invest and consumers to spend. However, these measures were not as effective as hoped. The near-zero interest rates led to what economists call a liquidity trap, where people and businesses prefer to hold on to their money rather than spend or invest it, even when interest rates are low. Quantitative easing and its limitations. Quantitative easing was a significant part of Japan's monetary experiment. The BOJ began purchasing government bonds and other financial assets in large quantities, hoping to flood the market with money. The goal was to boost inflation, stimulate spending, and encourage lending. However, the impact of QE was limited for several reasons. Firstly, Japanese consumers and businesses were deeply cautious. After years of economic uncertainty, they were more inclined to save than to spend. The deflationary mindset was hard to shake, and even with more money in the system, demand remained weak. This cautious behavior undermined the effectiveness of QE, as the extra money injected into the economy did not translate into increased consumption or investment. Secondly, Japan's aging population posed a unique challenge. As the population aged, the workforce shrank, and there were fewer young people to drive economic growth through consumption and innovation. Older populations tend to save more and spend less, which further dampened the impact of QE. Structural economic issues. Beyond monetary policy, Japan's economy faced structural issues that monetary policy alone could not address. One significant issue was the rigid labor market. Japanese companies were reluctant to hire new employees or make significant investments due to uncertainties about future economic conditions. This caution led to a lack of job creation and wage growth, which in turn stifled consumer spending. Additionally, Japan's government was slow to implement necessary structural reforms, such as deregulation and opening up markets to more competition. These reforms were needed to make the economy more dynamic and responsive to global changes. Without these reforms, the economy remained stagnant, and monetary policy could only do so much to stimulate growth. The impact of global economic conditions. Japan's economic experiment was also affected by global economic conditions. During the 2010s, the global economy faced multiple shocks, including the 2008 financial crisis, which impacted Japan's export-driven economy. As global demand for Japanese goods declined, the country's economic recovery stalled. Japan's heavy reliance on exports made it vulnerable to global economic fluctuations, further complicating the effectiveness of its monetary policies. The role of Abenomics. In 2012, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe introduced a new economic policy known as Abenomics, which aimed to revitalize Japan's economy through three arrows: monetary easing, fiscal stimulus, and structural reforms. While Abenomics initially brought some optimism, its impact was limited. The structural reforms needed to boost long-term growth were slow to materialize, and the benefits of monetary easing and fiscal stimulus were not enough to overcome the deep-rooted challenges facing Japan's economy. Japan's money experiment failed to achieve its intended goals due to a combination of factors, including a cautious population, structural economic issues, and global economic conditions. While the Bank of Japan's efforts to stimulate the economy through near-zero interest rates and quantitative easing were ambitious, they were ultimately insufficient to break the cycle of deflation and stagnation. The experience highlights the limitations of monetary policy in addressing deep-seated economic challenges and the importance of comprehensive structural reforms in achieving sustainable economic growth.